Ever get that gut feeling someone isn't telling you the full truth? On average, people lie at least once a day, usually to protect someone, avoid consequences, or gain an advantage. That's why learning to spot deception isn't just a neat skill, it's a form of personal protection. And for decades, the FBI has relied on specific lie detection methods during interrogations. Today, we're breaking down the techniques you can use in everyday conversations to tell when someone might not be honest. Ask smarter questions. A 2018 study explored which types of questions reveal lies most effectively. Broad questions like, "How did last night go?" rarely work. They allow someone to stay vague, skip details, or deflect. Slightly more pointed questions, like, "You didn't come home late, right?" aren't much better. They still offer an easy escape hatch. The most effective approach? Open-ended questions framed around a negative assumption. For example, "What made you stay out so late last night?" This phrasing gently pushes the person to provide real details. Truthful people naturally expand on the context, while liars are forced to invent a story, which increases the chance inconsistencies will appear. Follow-up questions are just as important. Asking something like, "What were you doing just before that?" a few minutes later can reveal gaps or contradictions that weren't obvious in the initial answer. And remember, tone matters. A calm, curious approach encourages them to speak more freely, making it easier to catch subtle signs of dishonesty. The 5-second window. Another key technique comes from the FBI's concept of deception clusters. Right after you ask a question, the first 5 seconds are the most revealing. That's when instinctive reactions surface before someone has time to carefully craft or polish a response. Watch for both verbal and nonverbal cues. Dodging the question, contradicting themselves, over-explaining, hesitating unnaturally, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, or touching their face. One small sign alone doesn't prove anything. Everyone has quirks. But when 2 or more signals appear in that short window, you've spotted a cluster, a pattern that strongly suggests the person may not be telling the truth. By combining careful questioning, attention to timing, and observation of subtle verbal and physical signals, you can get a much clearer picture of whether someone is being honest. These techniques aren't foolproof, but when used thoughtfully, they give you a real advantage in spotting deception before it catches you off guard. Notice changes from normal behavior. FBI agents always start by figuring out someone's baseline, how they act when they're relaxed and not under any pressure. They ask simple, neutral questions to observe the person's natural voice tone, posture, gestures, and speech rhythm. If you know someone well, you already know their baseline. When the topic shifts into more sensitive territory, watch for changes. If someone who always maintains eye contact suddenly can't look at you, or if their tone tightens up, that mismatch can be a sign that something in their story isn't real. The double question technique. One of the most reliable ways to spot a lie is to ask 2 related questions about the same event, spaced out over time but approached from slightly different angles. First, you might ask, "You went to the gym yesterday, right?" Then, later in the conversation, "What workout did you do yesterday?" The details will remain consistent, the timeline will make sense, and the responses will flow naturally. A person who is lying, however, often struggles to keep everything straight. Minor details may change, they might contradict themselves without realizing it, or the sequence of events may shift slightly. Even small discrepancies can be a strong indicator that parts of their story are being fabricated. You can enhance this technique by asking follow-up questions that probe the same event from different angles. Who was with you? Or, what time did you get there? Lying is mentally demanding. The person has to invent facts, remember what they said earlier, and make the new details fit the previous story. This cognitive juggling increases the likelihood of inconsistencies. Another subtle layer is observing how long it takes them to answer. Truthful people usually answer smoothly, with natural pauses for thinking. Liars may either respond too quickly trying to sound confident, or stall unusually long while constructing their story. Closely linked to this is the way someone chooses their words. People who are lying tend to soften or hedge their statements to protect themselves. You'll often hear phrases like, "I think," "maybe," "I guess," or "I'm not completely sure, but." These hedges give them room to backtrack if challenged, essentially creating a safety net in case their story doesn't hold up. It's important to recognize that not everyone who uses uncertain language is lying. Some people naturally speak this way or are simply cautious by nature. The real indicator is where and when these phrases appear. The story may sound plausible on the surface, but repeated hedging suggests they're carefully shaping their narrative rather than speaking freely. You can combine this observation with the double question method for even stronger results. Ask a first question, note their hedging, then follow up later. If their responses shift, contradict, or continue to rely on vague qualifiers, it's a sign they may be fabricating details. Essentially, uncertain language is like the subconscious cracks in a story, small clues that reveal when someone is trying to control the narrative instead of being honest. Shifting the topic. One of the subtler signs of deception is when someone suddenly changes the subject. This often happens because the current topic is putting pressure on them or touching a sensitive point they want to avoid. It's a classic escape tactic. Rather than answer directly, they attempt to steer the conversation towards something safer or more familiar. It's not always obvious. The shift might be casual commenting on the weather, a minor detail, or a completely unrelated topic, but if it consistently occurs when critical details are being discussed, it's worth paying attention. Repeated topic changes during key moments can indicate they're trying to hide inconsistencies or uncomfortable truths. Interrupting with a context shift. Here's a more advanced approach that builds on that idea. Lying is mentally exhausting. A person fabricating a story must track invented details, maintain internal consistency, and avoid contradictions. Interrupting them strategically forces them to reorganize their mental script, often revealing cracks in the story. For example, while they're mid-explanation, you could ask, "Wait, what were you doing just before that?" Truthful people can usually pick up where they left off and incorporate the extra detail without issue. Liars, on the other hand, often stumble. They might pause awkwardly, repeat themselves, or shift the timeline and details in subtle ways. The key is to remain calm and non-accusatory. After the interruption, simply say, "Okay, sorry for interrupting, go ahead." The way they resume the story is extremely revealing. If details change, are omitted, or seem forced, you're likely witnessing a deception, planting a false detail. Another effective technique is slipping a small false detail into the conversation. This creates a test. Does the person notice and correct it, or do they go along with it to protect their story? For instance, you said it was Tuesday, but wasn't that the day the store was closed? Someone telling the truth will almost always catch the inconsistency immediately and correct it. Someone lying, however, may hesitate, agree, or try to weave it into their story, afraid that contradicting you could unravel the narrative they've constructed. This method works best when the false detail is plausible and fits naturally into the story. Too obvious, and it might just confuse anyone. Too obscure, and they may genuinely not know. Checking time, consistency. Time is one of the most revealing factors in deception. Ask for specific time-related details. What time did you leave? When did you arrive? When people fabricate events, they often struggle to make timelines realistic. The time it would logically take to complete certain actions may not match their story, or sequences of events might contradict each other. Even small gaps, arriving impossibly fast, forgetting how long something took, or claiming two events happened simultaneously, can reveal dishonesty. To dig deeper, ask related follow-up questions. Did anything happen on the way there? What happened right after you got there? Liars are forced to patch these details on the fly, which increases the likelihood of inconsistencies. Truthful people usually provide smooth, consistent answers because they're recalling actual experiences rather than inventing them.